For nearly a century, we've walked through natural history museums and looked at the March of Progress, that famous silhouette of an ape slowly straightening its back, losing its hair, and gaining a forehead until it becomes us. It's a seductive image because it suggests that our existence was an inevitable upward climb. At the center of that climb sat a specific character, Homo heidelbergensis. In the textbooks, this was the great ancestor, the rugged, muscular bridge that connected the ancient Homo erectus to the modern Homo sapiens. It was a tidy, comfortable story. But science has a way of shattering comfort. Today, that linear ladder is being kicked away. Imagine waking up to find that the person you thought was your grandfather was actually a distant, unrelated stranger who just happened to live in the same neighborhood. That is exactly what has happened to our understanding of the African Middle Pleistocene. The fossils we once bowed to as our progenitors, the massive Kabwe skull from Zambia and the scarred Bodo cranium from Ethiopia, have been DNA tested and redated by the most advanced technology humanity possesses. The result? They aren't our ancestors. They are orphans of time. They represent a parallel version of humanity that thrived, hunted, and loved in the shadow of our own emergence, only to vanish into the red dust of Africa. Today, we're going to step into that dust. We're going to explore why the great ancestor model collapsed and what it was really like to live in an Africa where being human meant something entirely different than it does today. To understand how the story broke, we have to look at the Kabwe scandal. For decades, the Kabwe 1 skull, also known as the Broken Hill skull, was the gold standard for Homo rhodesiensis. Because it looked so archaic, with its monstrous brow ridges and sloping forehead, scientists simply assumed it was old. They slotted it in at 500,000 years ago. At that age, it worked. It gave evolution enough time to fix that rugged face and turn it into a modern one. But in 2020, a team led by Chris Stringer decided to stop guessing. They used direct dating techniques, uranium series and electron spin resonance, directly on the bone of the skull. When the data came back, the scientific community gasped. The skull wasn't 500,000 years old. It was roughly 299,000 years old. This wasn't just a minor correction. It was a total demolition of the linear model. Why? Because we already have fossils of Homo sapiens, creatures that look exactly like you and me, from Jebel Ehud in Morocco, that are 315,000 years old. Think about that for a second. If the primitive Kabwe human was alive 299,000 years ago, and the modern sapiens was already established 315,000 years ago, then Kabwe cannot be the ancestor. It's a chronological impossibility. It's like finding a 1950s rotary phone that was manufactured in 2024. It tells us that these robust, archaic humans weren't becoming us. They were staying exactly as they were, living alongside us. Africa wasn't a laboratory for a single species. It was a diverse continent where different experiments in humanity were running simultaneously. If the dates provided the when, the morphology, the shape of the bones, provides the why. If you were to stand face to face with the Bodo individual 600,000 years ago, you wouldn't see a proto-human. You would see a specialized, formidable creature. The Bodo and Kabwe lineage possessed what we call a massive midface. Their faces projected forward, anchored by thick, flaring cheekbones, and a continuous shelf-like brow ridge that served as a structural buttress for a powerful chewing apparatus. They were built for high-stress environments, perhaps processing tough, fibrous foods or enduring extreme physical demands. When we analyze the way these faces grew, we see a fundamental divide. In modern humans, our faces are retracted. We have a tucked configuration. During our childhood, Our facial bones undergo a process of resorption. The body actually pulls bone back to create that flat, vertical profile we see in the mirror. But in the Kabwe and Bodo fossils, the growth was depositional. They kept piling bone on, pushing the face further out as they aged. This is a crucial piece of personal analysis. Evolution rarely reverses a complex growth pattern. To get from a Kabwe face to a sapiens face, nature would have to completely rewrite the developmental script of the human skull. It is far more likely that our true ancestor was a gracile lineage, a group with smaller, flatter faces that branched off much earlier, perhaps from something like Yunshen Man in China or an undiscovered African population. We didn't evolve from the giants. We evolved away from them, choosing a path of facial reduction and brain case expansion, while they doubled down on robustness. Imagine Africa during the Middle Pleistocene. It isn't a vast, empty wilderness. It is a braided river of populations. This is a concept that is replacing the tree of life. In a tree, branches go their separate ways and never touch. In a braided river, streams split, run parallel for miles, and then merge back together in a swirling chaos of genetic exchange. While the Rhodesiensis giants, the Kabwe and Bodo types, dominated the lush East African rift valleys, other groups were carving out their own niches. In the dark, claustrophobic caves of South Africa, the strange, small-brained Homo naledi was likely still persisting. In the north, the earliest Homo sapiens were beginning to master a new kind of stone technology, the Middle Stone Age toolkits, that were lighter, sharper, and more versatile. There is a profound philosophical shift here. We used to think we were the only humans because we were the best. But for most of our history, we were just one of many. We likely saw these other groups. We likely feared them, or perhaps we traded with them. Geneticists have found ghost DNA in modern African genomes, bits of code that don't match us, don't match Neanderthals, and don't match Denisovans. These ghosts are the legacy of the Kabwe people. They didn't die out completely. They were absorbed or interbred into the rising tide of sapiens. We are not a pure species. We are a mosaic, a collection of prehistoric echoes. To understand the reality of this parallel humanity, let's look at a concrete, heart-wrenching example. In 1921, a miner named Tom Zwigler was blasting for lead and zinc in a cave at Broken Hill, Zambia. Amidst the rubble and the dust, he found a face looking back at him. It was the Kabwe one skull. But when scientists cleaned that skull, they found something more than just evolutionary data. They found evidence of a life of immense struggle. This individual had some of the worst dental health ever recorded in a fossil. 10 of his upper teeth were riddled with abscesses, deep, agonizing infections that would have made every waking second a nightmare of throbbing pain. He also had a small hole in his skull, likely from an ear infection or a parasite that had eaten through the bone. This man lived 299,000 years ago. He wasn't a missing link. He was a person. He survived those infections for years, which means someone else in his group must have cared for him. Someone else shared their softest food with him because he couldn't chew. Someone else protected him when he was too weak to hunt. This story shatters the idea that archaic means savage. These side-branch humans had social structures, empathy, and perhaps even their own forms of language. They lived, suffered, and cared for one another in an Africa that was far more crowded than we ever imagined. When his lineage finally vanished, it wasn't because they were stupid or inferior. It was because the world changed. The climate shifted, the braided river moved, and our particular branch of the river happened to flow into the future, while theirs dried up in the sun. For decades, the out-of-Africa theory was a rigid dogma. We believed everything important happened in Africa, and then we simply walked out and replaced everyone else. But as we look at the failure of the Heidelbergensis model, a new, more radical possibility emerges. If the African fossils, like Kabwe, are too young and too specialized to be our ancestors, where did we come from? Some researchers, including the legendary Chris Stringer, are beginning to look toward Eurasia. We see fossils in China, like the Dali or Harbin crania, and the Yunxian specimens, which show modern facial features and surprisingly early dates. This leads to a startling analysis. Perhaps the ancestor of Homo sapiens didn't stay in Africa. Perhaps our lineage moved back and forth between continents, evolving in a global dance of migration. The complexity we see in the DNA, where Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Sapiens all seem to share a common ancestor, roughly 600,000 to 700,000 years ago, suggests that the true ancestor is much older and much more widespread than the Kabwe giants. We are looking for a small-faced ghost that lived long before the massive-faced titans of the Middle Pleistocene ever walked the earth. As we close this chapter on our rewritten history, what is the clear message for us, the survivors? The story of the Kabwe and Bodo fossils teaches us that humanity is not a destination. It is a spectrum. We are not the finished product at the end of a long assembly line. Instead, we are the lucky survivors of a chaotic, experimental past. The fact that we once believed these robust giants were our ancestors speaks to our own bias. We wanted to see a story of progress from primitive to advanced. But nature doesn't care about our labels. Nature cares about adaptation. The Kabwe people were perfectly adapted to their world for a massive stretch of time. They weren't failures. They were a different way of being human. The ultimate lesson is one of humility. We share our DNA with ghosts. We walk on ground that was once held by different species of humans who were just as human in their emotions and their struggles as we are. Our origin isn't a straight line. It's a swirling, braided river of fire, stone, and bone. We are the sum of many parts, many lineages, and many lost cousins. When you look at the stars tonight, remember that 300,000 years ago, another kind of human was looking at those same stars from a cave in Zambia. They didn't lead to us, but they lived with us. And in the silence of the fossil record, they are finally telling us their true story.